well, it's 1:33. We can probably go ahead and get started. I just, if anyone else happens to join us as we're talking, we'll just let them in. And I just wanted to say thank you for all of those of you who are here. I'm not sure if everybody who said they were going to be here is here yet, but it looks like the majority of you are. This meeting is being recorded. And this is our first affordable housing project team meeting for the town of Canton. Thank you for joining us. Is everybody able to hear me okay? Okay, good. I see a lot of nodding heads. Perfect.
Yeah, Sarah, just so you know, your internet must be cutting in and out a little. You were a little garbled there, but.
Oh dear. Okay. Well, hopefully you can hear me. But just for those of you who haven't been involved, this project team probably is a few years in the making. Officially, it didn't start until this year. This is our first meeting, obviously. But for a long time in various boards and committees in the town, we've been hearing, that there's a need for affordable housing, and not only affordable, but accessible and inclusive housing. We've had some success stories. We've got Trolley Station and Creekview Apartments are really popular right now, but we still hear that there's a need for more. And so a lot of people here at the town are wondering, what can we do to help that? What can we do to increase the availability of housing that for all of incomes, all abilities, all ages. And so that's kind of how this project got started. And I'm grateful that so many people have shown an interest, and not just people in, residents in the town, but nonprofits and other community groups, even outside of the town. So this is really exciting for us. This is important to a lot of people here. In the town, residents, community members, staff members, board members, and other committee members too. So I'm really optimistic about, the conversations we're going to be able to have. This is part of our comprehensive plan going back from 2003. It's making the town affordable for, everybody is one of the goals of the comprehensive plan. But I feel like, and I think other people might agree that, we haven't been able to really do that for the number of people who need it. So, I think everybody will share that this might be, hopefully we can get some good ideas and get some plans. And I think that we have a great group of people to get started. One of the things I hope that we can cover today are just some housekeeping items, maybe a schedule for the year. We can decide how often we may want to meet, what roles the various groups and people in this committee can play, and then, schedule, time of day, stuff like that. It's important to make sure everybody can come. And then, yeah, we'll take it from there. Since this is the first meeting, I know this is hard in a Zoom meeting, but if we can kind of go around, I may just call on each of you to introduce yourself and let us know, who you are in the community. If you're a part of a nonprofit, give us a little bit of information about that. And since there's no room to go around, I'll start with the people on my screen in the order I have in front of me. So Joyce, you are first on my screen. If you'd like to kind of introduce yourself and give us a little background.
You gotta unmute, Joyce.
Joyce, you're muted. Can you hear me?
I can't unmute me.
We can hear you now.
All right. Okay, Joyce Marthaller. I'm a member of the Citizens Implementation Committee, a committee of the town of Canandaigua, and we have been charged with, of course, implementing the goals of the comprehensive plan. So this is one area that I'm very interested in. I've been involved with the town for, I don't know, lots and lots of years. I look forward to the progress that we can make.
Thank you, Joyce. Jared, you're next.
All right, I'm Jared Simpson. I'm a 23-year educator in the Canandaigua City School District, born and raised in the town. I'm also a town board member and deputy town supervisor, and looking forward to seeing what we can do to get more people into the town and affordable home ownership and all those plans and goals, which is really exciting.
Thank you. Tom. Tom, you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm Tom Schwartz. I am a former planning board member and presently on the Citizens Implementation Committee and on the Ordinance Committee. And that's all that comes to mind at the moment.
Conservation Easement Team.
Oh, there you go.
I have to remember for you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Nash, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Nash. I'm the executive director with Habitat for Humanity of Ontario County, and our organization has been working in the local community for just over 30 years, building and rehabbing and repairing homes to make them affordable for individuals in need.
Thank you. We're glad to have you with us. Thank you for joining us. Matt Horn, go ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm Matt Horn. My day job is with MRB Group, and in my spare time, I'm a groupie and fan club member of the CIC in Canandaigua. I really enjoy watching that group work and getting lots of things done. Affordable housing is a passion of mine. It's something I've worked on my entire career, and Canandaigua is a passion of mine. It's something that I've been working on in more recent years. So MRB Group is also serving in an executive role at the Canandaigua Local Development Corporation. So kind of looking at this through that lens as well, but excited to be here and appreciate the invite.
Thank you. Let's see, Brenda Spratt.
Hi, I'm Brenda Spratt. I'm the Executive Director at Family Promise of Ontario County. We have been sheltering homeless families for the past maybe 2.5 years in Ontario County. We are expanding to get some additional apartments that we're currently using now for shelter, since we can't do our rotation model through congregations. So we have apartments in Canandaigua, and now we're getting apartments in Geneva as well. We are expanding our casework staff so that we can start to process all of the applications and work with all the people who are in arrears with their landlords throughout the county.
Thank you so much. It's really important work, so I know we're all appreciative of that. Doug, you're up next.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's an awesome group. Thank you all for joining us and participating with us. This is great to see so many faces, and no doubt in my mind this group will grow as it continues to do work. So I'm Doug Finch. I'm the town manager for the town of Canandaigua, and was originally helped to create the CIC back in 2014 and led that effort, working through our strategic initiatives and the comprehensive plan goals. And so just really excited to see, there's a goal in the current comprehensive plan that we're in the process of updating our comprehensive plan now, but the goal is along the lines of making the town of Canandaigua affordable and livable for people of all ages and abilities, and that includes income level abilities as well as other abilities. So, I'm really excited to see what this group is going to come up with and kind of where this goes, because I think there's a neat opportunity for our region to kind of be a showcase for this. I literally just finished a meeting with the Commissioner of New York City Parks just a few moments ago, and affordable housing came up actually relative to parks, believe it or not, and so and the impact that. And so I think that there's a tremendous opportunity. I see Karen Parkhurst on the call, who's also on our Parks Committee. So I'm just really looking forward to the outcome for this group. So.
Thank you. On my screen next, I have PathStone and also your name too. I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Sarah Simpson. I couldn't change my little name on there. So I'm with PathStone at the Canandaigua office. We're in the Parkside office suite across from Pownall. So I'm newer to PathStone. We're a nonprofit group that provides housing counseling, foreclosure intervention, as well as homebuyer education classes and rental workshops. So I'm definitely excited to be part of this group and provide some advocacy for our future homeowners and current renters.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Next on my screen, and I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name, but Pamela Ruschak. You're muted.
Yeah, pretty good.
Okay.
All right, I'm Pam Ruschak. Pretty new to Canandaigua, originally Seneca Falls, Jamestown, retired school administrator, and been living here in Canandaigua for about 11 years now. So basically interested in the housing committee to see how we can provide affordable housing for people, but also try to maintain the wonderful farmland and country that we have in this area, which is why people come here. So looking to see how the program develops.
Well, thank you for being here. Karen.
Yes, I'm Karen Parkhurst. I've been in Canandaigua going on 50 years, and I love the community. I currently serve on the CIC committee, Citizens Implementation Committee, and the Parks and Recreation Committee, and the Events Committee, and the Conservation Subdivision Committee, and I'm on the Master Plan Update team. And I'm also on the Ontario County Economic Development Board. And I have been nagging about affordable housing for quite a long time now, because I've seen personally when I am retired and when I was working, we in the company I worked for, we had some lower income jobs in the $15 an hour range, and I'm familiar with PathStone because I was a CFO, so human resources was in my office, and I would refer people to PathStone in particular because of their ability to help people find reasonable, affordable mortgages for homes. So I became interested in it back then, and this is back in the late 90s, and ever since then, it is evident, more and more apparent that we need to pay attention to this, because if we want a fully diverse community that is engaging and interesting, we need to have people from all different walks of life and capabilities, and that is a very, very necessary thing to support that element, is to have affordable housing. So I'll get off my soapbox.
Thank you, Karen. Dave Souter, you're next on my screen.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, hi, I'm Dave Sauter. I'm a resident of the town for the last 35 years. I also serve on the Parks and Rec Committee, so I'm looking forward to the path that this committee takes in terms of the town and in terms of affordable housing. So that's an interest of mine as well.
Thank you. Erin Pownall Burns. I hope I said that right.
Yes, spot on. I just got really excited about Karen's soapbox. I'm right up there with her. I believe that in order to have a functional community where people can be engaged, we have to work on affordable housing. And I don't think we're doing a proper job of that here in Ontario County. So I'm really obsessed with the ideas of inclusion, of engagement, of taking the resources that we have and maximizing benefit to our most vulnerable people, right? Who deserve to have a voice in the interventions that we're creating. And so, yeah, I'm a community member and a business owner, and I'm super excited to be here.
Thank you. Oksana. Oksana, are you able to unmute? Let's see. All right, well, Oksana, we'll come back to you. I'm not sure if you can hear us.
Am I unmuted?
Oh, yep, we can hear you.
Okay, all right. Oksana Fuller. I've lived in the town of Canandaigua for almost 40 years. I'm a former town board member, and I'm on the CIC economic development team, and also chair of the special events. And yes, because we've been talking for 6 years about affordable housing at the CIC meetings, I'm anxious to see what we can develop.
Thank you, Oksana. I think that's everybody. Well, look, there's one number, 0613. It's just a phone number, no name. If you've already introduced yourself, I'm sorry, I can't remember. And you're also muted.
That I don't know if that's Jared or not. He had Wi-Fi problems, had to drop off and was going to call in. So
no, I'm back.
No, he's
oh,
there.
You're back.
I'm
sorry,
going to be
you're
out
back.
here like five different times. You guys will be sick of me.
Okay.
It's *6 to unmute if you're on a phone, so they would have to do that first.
Okay. I'm still not sure who the phone number is, but if you can unmute yourself, you can introduce yourself, but we'll go ahead and move on. Thank you, everybody. It sounds like we have a great group of people. With this being our first meeting, I don't have a heavy agenda for us, but I'd be interested, for those of you who are familiar with the town, we've been talking about this for a while, but for those of you who haven't been participating with us on a committee, especially some of the nonprofits, and I'm willing to take suggestions, but it might be interesting to hear what you think your role in this committee would be, or, some of the topics, also some of the topics that we may want to discuss. And Doug, you can jump in, but from my point of view and from some of the committees, we've had here at the town who talk about this, something I've heard a lot is that, as the municipality, there's a lot of different things we could do, but you don't know what you should do. Some of the things we've talked about is, developers, they obviously they want to develop housing that's going to be successful, that, meets the needs of the people who would want to live there. But from some other, other person's point of view, maybe they, should have tried to develop something that's more affordable. But, it's difficult. We've heard from the developers that it's a difficult market right now. So, when we began thinking about starting this group, these were some of the big conversations we were having. How are we going to do this, and who can do what, and what those roles might be? So, I don't know if Doug, if you wanted to jump in, or even Matt, some of you, most of our own committee members will already know this, but Matt Horn with MRB did a couple nice presentations for us over the last couple of years, talking about what affordable housing is, you know, the differences between market rate and how, you know, how the affordability changes based on your perspective, obviously, and just what that means for a community and whether we even have any or not. But I don't want to be the only one talking. So if there's, oh,
Sarah,
go
let
ahead,
me,
Doug.
yeah, so jump in there and help you out here a second. So some of this I think is also a little bit of a moving target, but I think that we need to really start to figure out our game plan and what we're going to do. And part of the reason I say that is just within the last hour, I believe the president has announced over $1 trillion for, in part, affordable housing. And the reconstruction, I'm actually looking at $20 billion worth of tax credits being announced just moments ago for construction and renovation of affordable housing. So some of this is I think when we talk about affordable housing, and Matt, you've got a lot of experience, feel free to jump in here, but I think we need to think about a couple of things. We need to think about policy, and if there's any regulatory changes that we need to consider to promote affordable housing. And I'll use an example real quick for you. For years, we've had residents talk about it would be nice to be able to bring a boat up to the shore of Canandaigua Lake and go to a restaurant. But our code doesn't allow that. Our code doesn't allow us to have anything other than residential lake or residential housing. So again, do we need to make policy changes, regulatory changes in order to continue to promote affordable housing? I put that in one bucket, one category. Do we need to look at, there's definitely going to be a financial aspect of this regardless. What financial programs should we consider in terms of trying to promote or attract or retain or encourage affordable housing? And then, you know, there's the whole programming aspect with developers. You know, I don't think we have a lot of developers on this call, but at some point we need to talk to developers also to see what it would take to really understand what they could build for affordable housing if that's the route we're going. We don't have, specifically in the town of Canandaigua, we don't have a ton of buildings, big empty buildings that could be repurposed in affordable housing like some of the larger cities. We don't have it. So instead, what we have to look at is new construction if we're talking about the jurisdictional limits of the town of Canandaigua. If we're going to open that up and expand that and have a broader conversation in terms of community, then we could talk about repurposing some buildings. But I think we need to have some of those basic questions, you know, in conversations so that we understand kind of the general direction that you want to go as a team.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking about framing this as, you know, what do we want? Where do we want it? What are we going to do about it, right? And so, and what can we do about it as a municipality? So to Doug's point about geography, I mean, the town of Canandaigua is a very diverse geography. And when we start talking about, you know, my conversations with the CIC talked about affordable housing on a spectrum, with market rate being at the far right end, and the further to the left you go, in other words, the more affordable you tend to get. I see Erin. It's hard. I wish I had a screen share for this, but on the right hand side is market rate, and on the left hand side is fully subsidized. And so the further to the left you go, the more geography needs to be taken into account, because folks on the farther left end of the spectrum need access, typically walkable access to services, even if that is walkable access to public transportation. And so, Doug will, I think, appropriately say, let's keep the scope focused here so that we don't run down a bunch of rabbit holes like public transportation, which, the comp plan also talks about how do we deal with public transportation. So as we're thinking through our strategy or our wish list, we should be thinking about where this is going to go, and then what are we going to do about it? The town is limited in what it can do, but it has strong regulatory authority. It has access to some capital by virtue of applying for grants or sponsoring tax credits and other things. And so, we just need to think through. If a developer is building a product that we're interested in a place we're interested in having that product, how can we come full force with regulatory and funding support?
Sarah?
Yes, Karen, go ahead.
Okay, so I appreciate what both Doug and Matt have said. And certainly that's all part of it. I understand the need to look at policy and reform of regulations and code. First of all, I think we have to identify what affordable housing is, and it's not necessarily subsidized housing. And I use this expression a lot. We need to start thinking outside the box. We have to stop thinking about 17 to 2,500 square foot houses and think about 500 to 900 square foot houses, number one. And we have to start thinking about ways to bring that into the mix and support it, number two. But the big thing is we need to identify what we view as affordable housing. And it would also be important to identify current affordable housing within the town of Canandaigua. So I know that I have mentioned to Doug, in fact, I kind of harp on tiny homes, which is a big thing in the West, which is lacking housing. They have these, especially in California, they have a need for housing and affordable housing, and they've embraced tiny homes, as has Texas. But the other thing is, we have, as is evidenced by Factory 243, we have vacant space within the city and in some areas of the town, but more in the city, we have malls, strip malls that are empty. And we need to think in terms of turning those into livable space. And we have some really awful motels in the town that we need to think about encouraging and supporting the owners into turning those into livable space. And I just want to caution everybody. Just imagine it. Think outside the box. Don't think in terms of what we already have, because what we already have is wonderful, but what we can give to people who want to share what our community has to offer as a whole.
Thank you for that, Karen. Can I piggyback
So
on that while we're talking about? Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, go ahead. I think just from listening to Karen and listening to what Doug had to say, I think what we need to do is establish what the parameters are, because I agree with Karen. I think there are numerous buildings that are not in the town of Canandaigua that would make wonderful locations, like the I forget, spot 286 or whatever those apartments are there, the old List building. So I think that's one of the first steps we need to look at as a committee, is this going to be a town thing? Is this going to be a more global, greater Canandaigua thing?
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, I think we need to be really careful. I love the innovation and out of the box thinking idea. We need to be really careful about solutions that cause a hyper concentration of poverty, right? Because we know that creates a hotbed of social problems as related to poverty. And the second thing is we need to make sure that we're not creating solutions that leverage other people's poverty to make other people rich. So for example, I work as a case manager right now in Monroe County. I help people who are homeless get permanent supportive housing. So they get a voucher, right? So let's say it's for a 1 bedroom, it's about $775. I have one landlord who is buying all sorts of units, maybe bought 80 units, 100 units. I don't know how many units he bought this year, and he only rents to permanent supportive housing. So all these people have vouchers for $775, and they have the benefit of being housed, but this one developer is creating intergenerational wealth by leveraging their poverty, right? And so why can't we think about that as far as ownership? What would it be like to have a mortgage and have that voucher for $775 pay somebody's mortgage? So at the end of their life, they get to give that to their children. So we need to think about creative ways. There are some interesting tenant-owned buildings, right? Where they collectively own a building. I think that we have to be very careful about ownership when we're thinking about this and making sure that we're departing from the status quo, which has proved to be inequitable and increasingly divergent.
So Erin, if I can jump in, Erin, I love what you just said about the home ownership part. And Karen, I'm actually going to agree with you on this. So write this down. Okay, write it down. I love the idea of that 900, that 900 to 1,000 square foot. I mean, I think of the first home that I bought. Well, it's actually this house. We just doubled the size of it, but it was 900 square feet because that's all we could afford. Builders, we need to target the idea of home ownership, how we can get those affordable homes built, because the way to get the stronger community is get people here who are vested and can have the pride and the roots of that home ownership and the benefit that brings. So to be able to tie into that, I know there are grants. I'm hoping in the next couple of weeks to get our congressman here, because he worked on this type of affordable home ownership in Buffalo, and seeing what we can do here with grants, how we can tap into the stimulus money, whatever might come through, but focus on getting those target homes built and builders who can do it, and realize that, you might not have the same profit margin, but it's going to be a benefit coming into the community. Because I think, and that's my whole reason being here, that home ownership idea for me is key. I see that in the schools. I see that everywhere. Once you have that, then you can start to make that leverage upward, and it's a big step, and it's a big jump.
Just to piggyback off that, because I deal with future home buyers every day. So I definitely would love to see more investment in upkeep and repair of properties as well. The trend that we're seeing with new home buyers is what they can afford is generally, it needs a lot of work. We offer repair program services, but it can only go so far, and we can only assist so many clients. And it's significant amount of repair work. Like the city of Canandaigua, we partner with them for our repair grant. So it can be the landlord that applies, or it could be like a tenant as well, or a homeowner, to get those repairs done. But for the new home buyer, it's either they're priced out of the market right now because the market has just gone haywire, or they're buying homes that is going to give them trouble in the next 5 to 10 years because they have major repairs that need to get done. And then that leads to blight, it leads to vacant homes, and those types of issues. So we're trying to prepare homeowners for what it really is to be a successful home buyer for the long term. And we've heard over the past couple of years, I'm paying this amount of money for rent, I might as well buy a home, which is great, but they're not taking into the full scope of being a homeowner. That 10 years down the line, when you need a new roof, that could be extremely costly. And if they're not saving for it, they don't have the credit built up during that time frame, they could be in a really troubled situation at that point. So
if I could jump in too, I really appreciate all the comments that have been made already, and agree wholeheartedly with the significance of home ownership. Affordable housing, I think you got to have both. You got to have affordable rental, you got to have affordable home ownership. And from our perspective as Habitat, there seems that there is a lot of focus at times, and I don't mean to specifically call out Canandaigua, but it's a broad sense of the country. Affordable rentals gets a lot of attention, and there's often less funding or less attention paid to the home ownership piece. But when we look at the outcomes, what happens for a family that owns a home versus a family that rents in terms of the wealth building, the ability to pass on, the inheritance of that home or those things like that. That can be really transformative for the individual. But then additionally, when you look at the communities in which there is a higher level of homeownership, there is a community benefit as well, because people are more invested in where they live. They give back to the community, they join committees like this, serve on town boards. There's a higher level of civic engagement. And so I think those are all really significant factors to think about as we're considering how to create affordable home ownership as well as rental. I think both are very important. The other piece I wanted to just touch on real quickly is, so far we've talked a lot about creation of new affordable dwellings, and I think that's really important because there's certainly a huge lack. But one of the things that our organization has learned over the years is that if we don't pay attention to preserving, and that comes both in terms of the repair and upkeep, but also in terms of, especially in home ownership, retaining that affordability when that home is sold is really important. And if we don't address that, we end up chasing our tail, where we create one house and make it affordable for family number one. And when 20 years from now, the market has shifted and that home is appreciated in value, or maybe the community has appreciated in value, and the house is no longer affordable when it gets sold that second time or third time, and making sure that we're protecting our investment in housing affordability so that we keep those affordable homes in the housing stock, while at the same time allowing families to still grow some equity as well. So I think that piece needs to be looked at, as well as the creation, the preservation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in a little bit. In terms of the log jam that's happening in the country across, is really this fact that landlords are afraid to open new apartments or take in new families that may not be able to pay the rent in the future. And they're already owed 12 months in arrears for the people that they have currently. So this wave of funding that is coming through the Treasury is designed, this ERAP program is designed to really make the landlords whole and to preserve housing for the low-income families that are already in this housing. But I think at some point we're going to have to consider there's low-income families that are working, and there's low-income families that are receiving social services and need housing that is even less expensive because the amount of funding they get from DSS, is not enough to afford an apartment. And there are families that need small apartments like you're talking about, but a lot of the families that we see are large families. I have 2 families of 8 right now. I've had families, of 5 and 6 that come through, and what are you going to do? We have funding, like I said, to expand the apartment program, and I'm having an impossible time finding apartments that we can rent so that we can use them as emergency shelter space. We have started the conversation with our board about converting something or building something that would be affordable housing for us to use as a static site, or also apartments for people who graduate from our program. There are affiliates nationwide for Family Promises that are converting old motels and making them into affordable apartments. They're working with developers and taking maybe a floor of, an apartment complex, maybe take 10 out of the 60 apartments, designate them for families that are coming out of their program. So we're really looking, at the housing piece, knowing that families come to us and there's no place for them to go when they're ready to graduate from our program. So you know, we're looking at this treasury money. We're hoping that there is real community awareness and engagement and promotion amongst landlords and tenants, that this funding is available, in hopes that once the landlords are made whole, then they may loosen up and rent some of their other units at a more affordable rate, so that people can start to move around, so that people can start to move in.
I think one of the things, I think one of the things we could start to do, along with all the pre-work that we need to do, is identify orphan properties in the town of Canandaigua. Yeah, I don't know, I have no idea how many there are, if there are any, but I am wondering if there are some. Doug, do you know, are you familiar at all?
Yeah, so it's, you know, we're very fortunate, Karen, in that regard, that we don't really have that situation in the town of Canandaigua. I mean, there's a few goofy little things, like we've got a 1/4 of an acre piece that is currently owned by the town of Canandaigua that really is in the city. And there's some goofy little, tiny little pieces that probably, I'm not even sure you could build a house on, or anything on it for that matter. But we're very fortunate in that regard. So there's not really that type of situation. We do have some properties that are working their way through the bank foreclosure process and those types of things right now. But, you know, classic example, we had one that was 3 years, I think, on at Wells Curtis, and that has now transferred owners. And actually, but that's, I also don't know that I would say that was affordable housing, because I think it was 300,000 plus when it finally sold. So, you know, so part of what, you know, your guys are all talking about great things and awesome things, but I go back to, you know, and I think you said it too, Karen, we need to define what affordable housing is. We need to understand what the real need is, so that, you know, kind of one thing, there's a regulatory side that only the town board can address, whether that's the sizes of homes or whether that's zoning and where these, you know, affordable housing could be located, or even the analogy that you used of the motels being repurposed. Our town code doesn't actually even allow that, which is why I think part of the reason why the current owners are still the current owners, because, you know, technically those motels that you're talking about, they do not allow long time stays, even though, and I understand what you're saying, Brenda, and stuff, that those are some of the locations that I think some of the other agencies are looking to locate people because they don't have anywhere else to go. But actually our town code doesn't allow that. So there's definitely regulatory things that the town of Canandaigua can address, but there's also all the programming things, which is the overwhelming majority of what I heard from everybody. And that maybe is a broader conversation. And that's where, and Matt, I hate to keep bringing you back into this, but the LDC might be an opportunity here. The LDC is Local Development Corporation. That's a joint entity of the town, the city of Canandaigua, and the Canandaigua Chamber of Commerce. And I can say this because I'm just one of the board of directors members, and I don't get a vote on that board, but you know, maybe the LDC can be involved in terms of an ownership and protecting that investment, or some other, you know, I think, again, to use the analogy, thinking outside the box, the LDC can own real estate. The town or the city can't necessarily own real estate, not very easy, but the LDC can. So maybe there's some opportunities for us to think about some different perspectives.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Doug. And it's not unusual that our minds would turn to programming and you know, and to these kinds of technical solutions. I also, you know, I think the concerns that Brenda pointed out are pretty global. You know, I've worked with Ontario County, Livingston County, Seneca County, and others in their Department of Social Services, and all of them are experiencing a dearth of next level housing, right? Next level supportive housing. So you graduate, if you will, from county support into now I'm on my feet. Now I'm able to kind of take on more ownership in my situation, and the product isn't there. And so I think to a point someone made earlier, identifying the gaps. Where are they in Canandaigua in terms of product? Where along that spectrum are there just big holes? And I do know that that certainly if I'm reading the Canandaigua market correctly, that's a huge hole that just beyond a heavy subsidy programmatically that there's a huge hole in that first generation affordable housing model. And Doug's right, the LDC has a incredible flexibility in terms of ownership of property and the idea that the town and city would collaborate on something like this, goes a long way toward funding opportunities and really making a case for why these particular projects are special.
Doug, I think it might behoove us to look into finding someone who really has a good definition of affordable housing in a community that doesn't have affordable housing, and can define a path for us to approach it. I mean, I hear all these. I know the code is a problem. I know the properties are a problem. I know the builders are a problem. And we just don't have the background together to determine how to put all this stuff together. I don't think. Maybe you think we do, but I don't think we do. And I'm wondering if there are people that have been through this and are able to talk to us about it.
Hi, Karen. This is Sarah. Sorry, my internet cuts out, so I'm not on video. So according to HUD, Housing and Urban Development, for rental properties, 30% of your income should go towards your rent, your housing. So that's kind of like the official number. But I mean, if you look at somebody, making, let's say, like 20,000, annually, I mean, they're not going to have much left over for an affordable rental, and people are paying 40-50% of their income just towards living someplace. And that's just, it's untenable. They can't save. So it creates an obstacle to homeownership if that's what they decide to do, because they can't build up the funds to save. So I think determining, like you mentioned, what is deemed affordable for clients in our area. We conducted a survey. I'm the co-chair for the Ontario Housing Consortium. We're part of the larger Finger Lakes Housing Consortium, and it's a group of nonprofits, landlord associations, other groups essentially involved in housing. And we conducted a survey just to see what those agencies responded to what their average housing price was. And I mean, it's through the roof. I mean, the average number was 850, which may not seem a lot to, a lot of us here, but for very low income residents, I mean, that's a huge portion of their monthly income, especially if they don't have subsidies.
Yeah, and I want you to take care not to accept someone else's definition of affordable housing, right? So I think Sarah's case is the right one, right? So there's a HUD definition out there that says, and they call it house poor, right? So you're looking at 30% of your income. So you need to ask yourself, looking across Canandaigua, what's the average annual income? And that's, you'll get an average number, but really who is this affordable housing group trying to serve? And so I start thinking about, we use terms like workforce housing. So we do this affordable housing work in a lot of places. So we use terms like workforce housing. So then if you start thinking about what the predominant class of jobs that Canandaigua is working to attract, what are those jobs paying, and what's 30% of that? You know, that might be the starting point, right? Of, okay, we want to make sure that we're affordable to people who are working in Canandaigua and south of that, right? And below that, so that we're supporting those who aren't able to work at this point. So just make sure that this committee is defining what affordable housing in Canandaigua is. And you can look around for other examples, but at the end of the day, you'll want to calibrate it to your own community needs.
Just to piggyback on what Matt was saying there, the you know, the town of Canandaigua, one of the things that we're very fortunate, we're very, very diverse, right? And so when you're looking at generalized census data for the entire town, and obviously we'll have updated numbers coming very, very soon, our average income is way above the thresholds, way, way above. I mean, when you're talking about, you know, $5+ million homes along the lake, I mean, that's it really throws the average way off. But in 2018, the town of Canandaigua did a income survey of the hamlet of Cheshire. And when we did that survey, we actually identified that 54% of the households in the hamlet of Cheshire were at or below the poverty line. So if you want to micro target a specific area of the community, like for instance, the hamlet of Cheshire, we absolutely have the ability to do that, as opposed to more generalized, or if we're going to micro target specific areas of the town, we can certainly look at that. And when you talk about the hamlet of Cheshire, those homes are there. And that really gets into some of the programming things that everybody was talking about in terms of the upkeep, the repair, the refurbishing, those types of things. So again, it's kind of, I think we need some direction from the group on where you would like to go with this too. Sarah, I know you have to jump off. If you want, I'll just grab it from here and we can continue the conversation. Sarah, you're muted there.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I have a personal hard stop at 2:30, but yes, thank you. I knew Doug would probably continue. It seems like we have a really great conversation going. And I have notes of all the different things that it was interesting to hear everybody talking about. It's not just housing affordability, that's more complicated. There's so many more pieces to it, and it makes it, you know, it's harder. You can't just solve that with one solution. So I will let Doug take it from here. Thank you everybody for joining us. I do have some notes. I'll work on a summary after this, but I think this is going to be a really great group. So.
All right. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Tom.
Hi, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah.
Tom, let's come over to you. I know you have your hand up.
Going back a little bit, and I think Karen and Joyce were on the committee with Eric when he was working on the update of the comprehensive plan. He had some great statistics, maybe somewhat dated, on mean and median income and what families, what percentage rent, and so on. So we should have some decent data when we approach the issue of affordability for those in our community. And once we kind of define affordability, both for renters and for potential home ownership, then we've got to address, as Matt's pointed out, you know, the barriers to ownership, whether they're building costs. What's it cost a square foot, Karen? Couple $100 a square foot now, even for a modest house?
It's $154, the latest that I read in an article about across the country. That's an average, $154 a square foot.
We're up to 175 now.
Yeah. In our area, it's in the 175 to $225 range. For the high-end houses, it's in the $350 to $500 range.
Forget about high-end, but again, we got to look at building costs. We've got to look at land costs.
Yeah.
How small a lot can we get a house on, whether they're tiny homes, whether they're manufactured homes. But you know, that the cost of building is a barrier, the cost of the land is a barrier. Let's face it, zoning is a problem. We restrict lot size and building size. One of the big barriers in Canandaigua is NIMBYs, we have to face that. I mean, the minute we put subsidized housing somewhere, you're going to have a raft of people show up at the town board. Jared, you still with us? Yeah, I can remember, and Joyce, you can remember some subsidized housing where we actually had a board member come in and bitch about not in my neighborhood. So we've got NIMBYs, and as the nice folks from PathStone and so on have pointed out, we need to address access to credit for people that aren't credit worthy and access to subsidies, whether it's individuals or the town of Canandaigua or Ontario County or whatever is coming from the federal government. And then we've got to look for opportunities, whether it's uptown, when we rezone uptown, or whether we rezone the motel that's next to the new car wash up there or what. But we've got more than enough on our plate here. But we probably start out again, as we all said, defining affordability. And Matt and Eric's information would be, would identify at least the folks in the town of Canandaigua that are in need. Go.
Right. I have Ontario County numbers, and in Ontario County, there are 910 subsidized units of housing. And there are 4,500 families that qualify for subsidized housing. So even if you qualify, there are not vouchers, there are not, Section 8 vouchers. And so, that is a part of the problem.
I agree.
I could tell you that on my county board, of course, we support manufacturing businesses, several types of businesses that come in looking for financial support to expand. But part of the criteria is they need to ensure that they're going to add jobs in a salary range. And typically that's in the $15 to $20 an hour range. And I can tell you that, honestly, I ask this question of anybody that comes before our board, are you going to have jobs in that range? If so, how many? And without exception, these people, even though this is a county-wide thing, unless it's located in Geneva, as Matt probably knows, these people always bring up the ability to house people in that $15 to $20 an hour range of salary. And a lot of these people go to Wayne County and live in Wayne County. If we're going to build if I talk about a county, and Canandaigua was part of the county, we need to address this issue. We have economic development, as Oksana knows, she's on that committee, and we need to be able to provide the elements that provide for economic development, which increases our tax base and is helpful to make us a vibrant county. We really need to investigate this. I think we've had some great talk here. And I hope we go further with this, Doug, and determine a path to take. Jared.
Erin, go ahead. Go ahead, and then I'll jump in after you.
I just had some numbers from Alice. So Alice is a United Way report that stands for asset limited, income constrained, employed, right? So the people that are generally left out of poverty statistics. So before the pandemic, we had 4,792 households in Canandaigua. 11% of those were living below the poverty line, and 38% of them were living below what's called the Alice threshold, which is the minimum amount of money that you need to maintain a modern household, right? So I'm talking about having internet, yes, having transportation, yes, having a cell phone, because everybody does these things, right? So what that meant was that 2,348 households living inside Canandaigua were essentially hanging on by a thread, not really able to make that minimum budget needed to maintain a modern household before the pandemic. So we do have a lot of resources here, and 51% of us live above that Alice threshold, but we do have problems right here. And I think we can use Alice to inform some of what affordable means with a larger context. And like that HUD, like 30% of your income should go to housing. Well, what if I have 3 kids and I'm a single mom? Should 30% of my income still go to housing? How am I going to pay for my kids' sports, et cetera? Right. So it just gives us a broader sense of that. Go ahead, Jared.
Thanks. So I was going to build off of some of those stats and things that you shared. But before that, I think definitely we need to identify what affordable means for us before we can even go forward with anything, number one. Number two, then we need to see, all right, do we need to make some changes? Do we need to make some of these zoning changes? Do we need to change our code to allow ourselves to fill these voids and attract builders and others and that would be able to come in and help with that? With the school district gives a report to elected officials this year, and I think we have to be careful in Canandaigua because we like with housing, the average house value is what, Doug? It's 308. But if you take away the Lake District, the average house value is like 210, something like that. So we have a big disparity. So that number, our magic number, really isn't a magic. It's different than what that is. So we need to take those qualifiers out. In the Canandaigua School District, at the middle school, about 35% of the students are considered in poverty. This is all for Title I funding. The primary school is 40%, and interestingly enough, the academy is less than 30%. So, as people move out, as kids drop out, as other things, those numbers might change. So we need to identify what that is, and then we really can't do much until we identify that. We could talk all day about theories and things that we like, but until we identify, okay, what is our magic number? What is our target? Then what are the holes that we need to fill to meet that need for that target? Whether it's, do we need to identify people who can come and construct that? Do we need to change zoning so we can have more flexibility? Do we need to have some things updated in code so when we have conversations with developers, we say, okay, X number of your homes need to be in this affordable bracket so people can come in and live in these homes. So until we identify it, we can't really solve a problem that we're kind of guessing at.
If you can hear me, to piggyback off of that idea, I love that we have nonprofits and town officials and community people. What I would really love as another initiative to focus on is having the actual community's input. So we can talk, like you said, about this all day. We can decide what we think is affordable. We can decide all these other factors, but if we don't get the community involvement and their like feelings and needs heard, there might not be as much involvement, engagement, and we want to make this, a community for everybody. So I think having community buy-in and making sure that their voice is heard with this group is important.
So let me ask a question to the group along that lines. Who is missing from this group currently that we need to ask about? And let me ask the question another way also. I've heard a variety of you talk about county data, and obviously we know that, some of the data, for instance, the average income, the income levels are very different in the town versus the city. You can look at the data and see that. You see the assessed values are very different, town versus city. And when we're talking about a community in general, again, should we, and I'll just throw this question out here, do we ask, and maybe Jared put on your deputy supervisor hat, do we ask the county to be involved with establishing some sort of affordable housing group that looks at some of the programming aspects and some of those things, where and maybe some of this group targets some of the specific things relative that we can influence in the town and city? And again, I'll just throw a question out there, no magic answer, but.
Well, I can say from being involved with multiple groups, Geneva, they have their own housing initiative task force. You know, town of Canandaigua, it's great. You guys have our affordable task force. I'm sure there's other smaller groups out there as well. I think a lot of people are touching on these same needs. And I think it would be really great to see if this could be, like you mentioned, a county-wide initiative as well. There could be funds, you know, that we could pull for the county that would be more effective than potentially for the just for the town of Canandaigua. And I think there would be interest, and there's a lot of people working towards the same kind of goal as well.
Yeah, I think the county giving we need a broader look, which the county would provide. I think when you were asking about who's missing, I think builders, if we're talking about trying to figure out affordable home ownership, I think builders are the missing piece, and trying to figure out ways to leverage programs that are out there to be able to provide these. Because if we could talk about this till we're blue in the face and say, this is our target, this is what we need to come in at, and unless there are builders who are like, yes, we can help provide that, or if there are ways to help provide that, practically, I mean, that's another missing piece, is people willing to commit to help with that.
And obviously there are like bigger developers, but this isn't my department, but there's a whole residential development for PathStone. So we're a nonprofit agent, but we have we have tons of apartments all throughout the greater Rochester area. So our goal is to provide affordable housing. So looking into maybe, you know, nonprofits and their real estate development, like Urban League of Rochester, they have ones all over the greater Rochester area as well. And that would align more with what we're looking to do, which is provide affordable housing and not have to win them over to really say, like, please make sure that you have some lower priced apartments. You already have their buy-in, because we're looking to serve you know, low to very low income population.
So part of the money that developers use to fund the construction of the apartment buildings is HHAP money that is HUD funding that comes down through the state. It's become very political and very difficult to get HHAP funding. And so I think there needs to be also an agenda that is, you know, that is accepted in the political arena as well, so that we can get, you know, better advocacy at the state level to capture some of those dollars into our county and into Canandaigua.
I think one of the parties that would be beneficial to this committee is Happiness House. A Happiness House has built affordable housing for all levels of ability and disability. And they have and knowing what their projects are in the future, and they have got a plan of additional housing units on their property right across from the park. And I think they have accessed this funding that you're speaking about, Brenda. And they might be able to help us to, and they've come to the planning board when they were building their units, and I think they'd be a very good partner right now for the town of Canandaigua. But also, I think there are probably other entities out there. I don't know if Trolley Station is looking to build more, or some of the other non-for-profits who are looking for access, and we should know what's in the pipeline. Actually, because I think there, like you said, most of you have said, there are things going on now. There is interest in this topic. And I think a lot of people are finally, you know, putting the pen to the paper and saying, yeah, we can do this. Let's do it now. So that's my suggestion.
Yeah, I made a note. I think Happiness House, I believe they were aware of this And then DePaul is the other entity relative to Charlie Station.
Yes,
You know,
yeah.
so,
Oh, right.
we can certainly reach out to them and touch base with them.
And also there's the, there's the veterans housing that is there on Parkside Drive. What are the future plans for the Veterans Affairs? Where do they plan to doing anything more around here? Because of course the VA is here. So anyway, getting a feel about not only what we have today, but what's in the pipeline for the next couple of years.
Well, that actually, the veterans you mentioned, that's actually the Geneva Housing Authority. I know that was mentioned earlier. And then Geneva Housing Authority, they do have plans for some stuff in the town of Canandaigua, but they'd be a good one to have. You know, you guys, when you're talking about affordable housing, you talk a lot about apartments and those types of things, which is fine. That seems like that's a little easier to attract, but let's not forget single family homes too. I know, Jared, you're very passionate about that.
That is that. For me, if anybody were to say what's one of the biggest holes, that's it. I mean, because there's nothing in that regard. Try to buy something, anybody in here, if you have a single family home, put it on the market and it'll be gone in a few, because there isn't any.
Yeah.
I think we have two tracks that I'm hearing here. We have single family, and then we have multiple family units. So we could develop, strategies for both. We don't want to eliminate one or the other. If we work on one exclusive of the other, it would be years before we would work on the other. So it seems to me we've got kind of parallel lines here that we could be working on, and we would have to develop, that process in this, in this committee to do the work.
And I think Nash specifically, I think maybe you could help us. I know I've had conversations with the president there about kind of the model for Habitat for Humanity for Ontario County. I believe you keep an equity stake to help keep the prices down in terms of the land or the house. So, we certainly want to learn about that. And while that would be, and again, I go back to, while that would be difficult for the town of Canandaigua to do that, but if we have a partner, whether it's Habitat or even our own LDC that might be able to do some of those types of things, that might be another way to go about that.
Yeah, and I want to just piggyback on everything that's just been said, and Doug, I'd be happy to share more about kind of inner workings of Habitat, that probably for a different call than today's. But thinking about home ownership and versus rental, and I don't mean to say versus in a competitive sense, but I think a lot of times when we talk about building large scale, multiple unit stuff, we tend to think rental, but there are opportunities to do multi-unit scale housing that has a home ownership component to it, and allows for that kind of ownership stake and equity building that comes along with the single family home. And I think that is something that we haven't seen a lot of in this area, but it's something that it definitely is something Habitat does in other parts of the country and in other parts of New York State. And I'd be happy to share from our partners and our neighboring affiliates and what they've done with that, and look if there's some opportunities. What I was going to say about in terms of who's missing, and Jared kind of already mentioned builders, and it's been touched on a couple of times, but I think we also want to think big and small. So you've got big builders that are building, full-on development, whether it be for multi-unit or individual housing, but then you also have small builders that are doing a house here, a house there, and having both voices represented, because I think this is such a massive issue. It's going to take all of us moving together to address this. And so I think making sure that we have both the small and the big, the for-profit, the nonprofit, and those voices, so that we can really identify what the challenges are across the spectrum.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to code. We really need to take, I think, first of all, is take a look at code and how do we encourage giving builders the capability of building on smaller lots, under 1,000 square foot homes, 2 and 3 family homes. I know there was conversation about 2 family homes several years ago, and I don't know where that went. and things like that, because that all gives ownership to lower income people, having those opportunities available, those options available. But the only way we can do it is by looking at our building codes and by encouraging builders such as large builders such as Morel, you know, for every 10 large homes you build, how about building a 2-family home or a smaller under 1,000 square foot home? You know, have incentives for them to attract a different, a broader section of demographics to their developments. Go ahead.
And Karen, I think there's opportunity there too to build partnerships between for-profit and nonprofit, because one of the challenges we have at Habitat is, especially here in Ontario County, we're not at the scale where we can go in and buy a huge parcel of land and subdivide it and bring in all the infrastructure. And so we're constrained to looking for these small lots that we can afford to purchase and build our program on. But if we could partner with a larger entity and get a few lots in a larger development and build those out, you know, there'd be opportunity for us to create more impact in the community.
Yeah, the market, I know I've had conversations numerous times with Rick Herman, and he always calls me and says, hey, do you have any lots that you know of that are available for like the $5,000 range so that we can do a Habitat for Humanity house on it? But the problem is in the town of Canandaigua, the market, you know, you're easily paying $25,000 for a lot that has the utilities, and so it becomes very difficult. So it's been we're working on almost an hour and a half to wrap this up. How about let me ask two things in terms of logistics for the meeting. Want to meet once a month, and then kind of just to keep on top of this. Maybe does this seem to work for everybody? This time frame, kind of the end of the month, Erin? Yes.
I have one more unpopular opinion. The other voice that is missing is people with lived experience with poverty who need access to affordable housing, right? We should not be designing anything without their voice. And secondly, another unpopular opinion is that this time is not convenient for people who work full-time for minimum wage, right? Let's say I got 2 kids, I work full-time, you know, I can't schedule it into my day to stop at 1:30. So I just think that we need to be cognizant of that moving forward. If we want engagement, we have to make it possible.
Okay.
And the other thing that I think is missing, Doug, is a representative from the industry in the town of Canandaigua. And I would recommend someone from PACTIV, because PACTIV has some lower paying jobs, and they're a large entity and they might be interested in addressing this issue, might have some ideas. But then bottom line, 1:30 on Wednesday is really difficult for me. If we could move it to 2 o'clock, that would be great.
Okay. Probably what we'll need to do, it sounds like in terms of the time, is we'll send out a doodle poll. Let's do this, at least in terms of the topic. Let's maybe at the next meeting and we'll see who we can round up from other municipalities that have gone through this, or even federal or state entities, to really talk about the definition of the affordable housing. But to Joyce's point, I do think a lot of this is going to have to work in parallel, because otherwise you're talking about years and years and years. So, you know, regulations could be one parallel, programming could be one, some of the housing. Otherwise, you know, it's going to take too long to get anything done. So we might need to kind of divide and conquer a little bit. The other thing is, if you wouldn't mind, if you have an interest in maybe leading or helping to lead this team or a portion of the team or something, please let Sarah know. I know that it's something that we don't have for this team specifically. We as staff are not looking to necessarily lead a team. We want to help facilitate as much as we can. But if you're really passionate about it and somebody has an interest in really kind of taking the bull by the horns, you know, or at least a portion of it, that would be a lot of help too. So, you know, you can let us know offline on that. So what we'll do, it's we're coming up on 3 o'clock. So why don't we wrap up, just kind of pause a minute here if anybody has any closing comments, and we'll send out a doodle poll so that everybody can weigh in on times and provide comments and that sort of stuff. So. Any final thoughts? No? Thank you all so much for taking the time today. It's been great to, everybody's so passionate about it and so exciting. There's no doubt in my mind we're going to accomplish great things, and we'll see what kind of shape this all kind of develops into. But thank you all so much for your time and spending the time with us today.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone. Bye, folks.
Nice meeting you all. We'll see
Take
you
care.
again.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Nash.